No, TCL and Sony have not yet signed a partnership agreement, but they have published and signed a memorandum of understanding outlining each company's intentions. They emphasize their willingness to pursue a strategic partnership in the home entertainment sector, including televisions and audio systems, with TCL holding 51% and Sony holding 49% of its shares. It is expected that Sony and TCL will continue discussions to finalize binding agreements by the end of March 2026. Subject to the signing of these definitive agreements and obtaining the necessary regulatory approvals, among other conditions, the new company is expected to begin operations in April 2027. Why April? Well, it's typically the month when televisions from various brands begin being marketed in many countries. Clearly, a new legal entity will operate behind this partnership, but each product will retain its original name. In other words, the Japanese brand's televisions will retain their name, Sony, with the Bravia designation. Now, you might be wondering, will the quality of Sony products decrease? Well, we can neither confirm nor deny that yet, but it's expected that the quality will remain top-notch, not only in terms of using the image processing technology that has always characterized the Japanese brand, along with its speaker systems, but also in terms of the manufacturing quality of the LCD screens that TCL would supply, along with the likely production of the LED backlighting technology. We can't yet speculate on what will happen to Sony's OLED televisions. In fact, we don't know if they will continue, because Sony's OLED panels are supplied by Samsung and LG, and TCL isn't yet part of this market. We also don't know what will be agreed upon in those potential deals in March of this year. But the Chinese brand has made significant progress in improving the quality of its LCD, LED televisions, both in the entry-level range and in the mid-range and premium models. I know that many people still distrust Chinese brands because in the past, more than 10 years ago, everything from China was of low quality and tended to break down quickly. I myself experienced these kinds of problems with Chinese dual-SIM cell phones, which were all the rage at the time, but which stopped working with the first bump. However, in my 5+ years of experience reviewing and comparing smart TVs, I've noticed that TCL has been improving the quality of its products. It is true that the first models were not the best, because, for example, their entry-level models were terribly slow in their operating system interface. And in the case of the mid-range and premium models, more specifically in the mini-LED sector, they did not have the best performance in dark scenes with the local dimming function. But since 2024, and even more so in 2025, all those problems have been solved. Even so, some people still doubt their durability, thinking they'll break down in a couple of months. Anyway, getting back to this news of a possible partnership between TCL and Sony, it was something I thought would happen sooner or later. Well, not directly with TCL because there's also the other Chinese giant, HISENSE, but it seems TCL took the initiative. In fact, mysteriously, in 2025, TCL decided to change the color of its logo, going from red to a black background, just like Sony's, although it could be pure coincidence. And well, for several years now, Sony has lost much of its market share in entertainment, including smart TVs, audio systems, and mobile phones. Back in 2012, I owned several Xperia smartphones because at the time they were top-notch, and Samsung phones back then, for example, were rubbish in every way. In 2009 and 2010, I worked for Sony when they started promoting their first smart TVs, which were unattainable for me. But unfortunately, in 2011, the devastating tsunami struck, leaving almost all of Japan in ruins. And although this culture has shown us that rigorous discipline has helped them overcome many catastrophes, there are always lasting effects. Many Japanese brands, such as Toshiba, JVC, and Panasonic, which are among the most well-known, along with other smaller ones, began to experience problems manufacturing and marketing their products. Sony, for its part, also suffered, although they decided to focus on competing primarily in the premium sector, perhaps with the production limitations they faced after this natural disaster. This meant they couldn't mass produce, but perhaps they could at least produce fewer products of higher quality. However, several years ago, I noticed that in my country, the largest stores that used to carry Sony products stopped doing so. And of course, Sony televisions are currently outrageously expensive, and they're really not worth it considering their technical specifications. I mean, they're very good, but for half the price of a Sony full-array mini LED TV, you can get one model just as good from TCL. And it's not that the image processing is incredible. I mean, I can tell you that from my experience, having reviewed and compared countless TVs over the past 5 years. But experts give Sony smart TVs high scores because they greatly appreciate the cinematic approach Sony incorporates into its products. Even though its motion handling isn't the best for the average viewer, the judder effect isn't completely eliminated, thus avoiding the artifacts that film buffs hate so much. But look, you can achieve this on a TCL TV by tuning into filmmaker mode. It's also not like current Sony televisions will deliver 4K results with very low resolution content. Look, that will never happen. No current 4K TV from any brand can do that kind of amazing thing. And just because the televisions are Sony, it doesn't mean they'll be immortal devices, because sometimes there are complaints in forums about the Japanese brand's models. Although not as many as brands that sell more, but it's precisely because of that difference in units sold worldwide. By the way, in case you didn't know, TCL currently manufactures some smart TV models for brands like Samsung and LG. But anyway, I honestly see this as very good news if this partnership actually comes to fruition, because we would have the quality of Sony products at probably more affordable prices. Or at least that's the hope. Furthermore, we would have more competition in the market and thus avoid having to put up with the messes that Samsung and LG sometimes offer in some of their models. Yes, I'm referring to the QN70F and QNED85A, respectively, in most of their sizes. That's it. I remind you guys you can support my channel by acquiring a membership through my Patreon page, also by doing some purchase through the links I put in the description and in the pinned comment. That will help me a lot to keep creating content. Click the like button, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time.